This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Taliban set to reveal new Afghan government amid economic turmoil. Trilateral summit between Egypt, Jordan, and Palestine kicks off in Cairo. And Zimbabwe further eases COVID-19 restrictions as cases decline. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta, live in Nairobi. And for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. And tonight, I'm alongside my colleague Uche, who has our business headlines. Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. We bring you the highlights from the first day of China's International Fair for Trade Services in Beijing. And OPEC and its allies agree to gradually increase production as economies recover from the pandemic. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, back to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. So good to have you with us. Let's begin in Afghanistan, where the Taliban says it is capturing territory in the one province outside its control. Fighting continues in the Panjshir Valley, which has been resisting Taliban rule. Opposition fighters say they repelled heavy attacks and will continue to defend the enclave. Both sides are reporting casualties. The Taliban have been calling for a peaceful settlement, but an official said talks had failed in the capital, Kabul. Taliban leaders say they are working on forming an inclusive government that will respect people's rights within Islamic law. Meanwhile, Turkey says it is evaluating an invitation to operate Kabul's international airport. Let's get you more on this. We are joined by CGTN Zamaria Lai Abbasin from Kabul. Zamaria Lai, welcome to Africa Live. Now, as the Taliban prepares to announce a new government, can you give us an idea of the security situation over there? Zamaria Lai.
Hello, Richard. The security situation is far better than it was before 20 days ago, and the recent catastrophe and chaos because of Kabul airport was making everybody fear. Now, since the international troops have left Afghanistan, the situation is really normal in Kabul city and some other major cities. While in the villages and district level, everything is reported normal, and the Taliban seek to win the hearts of the people by behaving in different areas. They go to the mosque, they engage to the elders and everybody. That's how they are doing their own government, and the preparation also continues for the formation of the new Islamic government that the Taliban have already announced. A local media informed that Dr. Naeem, Taliban's political office spokesperson, has just confirmed that they are all set to prepare the announcement of the new government, but yet it's a little bit early because they don't want to give false promises to the nation. And also, the preparation inside presidential palace here in Kabul are getting accelerated everywhere. There are checkpoints, there are Taliban soldiers and armed men, and they're searching the cars and looking after everywhere. The hills, the top hills, and the doors to Kabul are already under control of the Taliban, and the patrols are getting very serious. Richard.
Well, Zamaria Lai, speaking of this new government, false promises and what have you, do we have any indication at this point of what the new government will or possibly look like?
Well, Richard, that's something we will get the answer very soon, tomorrow or Friday afternoon, when the prayers of the Friday is held. There are reports that the Taliban are awaited to be announcing their new government. But the question, what kind of government they will finally form for Afghanistan, that the international society and also the region and the people and parties and political figures and those sides engaged to Afghanistan will accept that kind of government. According to the Taliban, we heard the news that they're preparing everything, as they say, inclusive. They got a different definition for their inclusive government rather than the international community is emphasizing on. For example, the Taliban are nominating their own Tajik Taliban, their own Pashtun Taliban, their own Hazara Taliban as the inclusive government. And a framework of Taliban, they are doing these all things as we got information. For example, there are very major names. Mullah Yaqub, who is son of Mullah Muhammad Umar Mujahid, the former supreme leader of Taliban, and also Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is son of Jalaluddin Haqqani, has long history of jihad in Afghanistan till 1980s. And also Mullah Abdul Ghani brother, who has been in jail in Lahore, Pakistan, and now from 3 years to now, he is the leader of the political office of Taliban in Doha. They are announced as the nomination for different ministerial leadership. For example, the Ministry of Interior, Defense, and also Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So there is a fear of the monopoly by the Taliban. They have a different definition, and yet we have to wait what kind of government they are forming, because no written thing or material is in the reach of media or the reporter or anybody, because the supreme leader of Taliban, Mullah Hibatullah, just formed everything in Kandahar during the 3 days meeting, intra-Taliban meeting that he held.
Yes, indeed, Zamarlai, it would be interesting to see what this inclusive government would look like when it's all said and done. Thank you for that update and report. Tens of thousands of Afghans are currently struggling to leave their country after the departure of foreign forces. Many refugees have fled to Europe or other Asian countries, and a few to Africa. However, Afghans are not the only refugees from Asia to have found domicile in Africa in recent years. Yasser Hakim looks at how refugees from Syria are finding life in Egypt.
Shahir Rajoub is spending some fun time with friends in Cairo after a hectic day at work. A former journalist, he had fled the war in Syria via a road and boat trip to Egypt with his mother and brother in 2013.
We chose Egypt because they like Syrians. There's a unity between the two peoples, and there's a similarity in the way of living. The Egyptians welcomed us, and we settled in quickly.
Shahir has made good use of his time in Egypt.
I used to work in media. Here, I've established an agency to film events, weddings, and advertisements. On the side, I'm a real estate agent. With my good relations with traders, I also provide job opportunities for about 20 or more Syrians a month, so that they can have a source of income in order to live dignified lives.
According to Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi in April 2021, Egypt hosts about 6 million refugees. Syrians are over 500,000, but there are no refugee camps, as the North African country merges refugees within the community.
Some of them are living in a good standard of living, because I'm aware that some have their own apartment in the 6th of October or in the Rahab. Some of them are suffering in a condition which is not excellent. They are receiving support from the international community, from IOM, and from the Egyptian Red Crescent. And of course, Egypt is facilitating the services provided to them coming from such entities.
The North African country allows refugees to own a home, set up a business, buy land, and can enroll children in schools like any Egyptian. Taysir al-Najjar, a refugee himself, has established a charity organization to assist Syrians in the relocation process. Taysir says one main challenge is applying for residency.
The ones who have children enrolled in schools or own houses and big businesses are allowed residency, but others are not. The problem is we cannot travel to see our family members, and they can't come to visit. It's a problem I face personally, as my wife and children are in Saudi Arabia. We are far apart. Egypt is still a good place to live, a good place to have as home, especially since the people accept us. They are welcoming and gracious.
And Shahir agrees, but although he's settled down and has a successful business and life, this is never enough.
My country and my home is Syria. My dream is to return to my country. This is the dream of every Syrian. We pray for God to bring peace to Syria so that we can go back home and that the war ends.
And he's living by, hoping one day his dream comes true. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
The Egyptian capital, Cairo, hosted on Thursday a trilateral summit with Jordan's King Abdullah II and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. Leaders of the three states focused on issues including the stalled peace talks between Palestine and Israel. We earlier spoke to CGTN's Adel El Mahroui for more on this. Let's take a look.
Well, this is a conclusion of a long series of meetings that Egypt has been leading, which saw Egyptian Foreign Minister and the Chief of General Intelligence Bureau, Abbas Kamel, both visit the Palestinian territories and Jordan. There has been an intensified movement from the Egyptian side trying to align the vision of the Palestinians and the two adjacent Arab countries who share borders with Palestine, Jordan, which has border with the West Bank, and Egypt, which borders Gaza. And the purpose of that comes as a preparation for this month's General Assembly at the United Nations in New York, where the Arab efforts will once again be moving on to amass and rally international support to reach a peaceful solution to the Palestinian state. And this meeting comes as a conclusion to the efforts that has been exerted in the past 2 weeks. During the summit, the three leaders have condemned the recent Israeli actions, what they described as illegitimate measures that would jeopardize reaching peace and threatens a two-state solution. President Biden comes with promises of a more moderate approach to the Palestinian crisis. He's promising to have a U.S. consulate on the Palestinian territories, which would be a great diplomatic shift for the Palestinians. And therefore, Egypt, Jordan, and Palestine want to build the momentum of this international will, especially within the White House, and try to move the stagnant waters in the Palestinian file.
The army in the Democratic Republic of Congo says it has freed 60 people who were taken hostage by a rebel group in the northeastern province of Ituri on Wednesday. At least 4 people were killed and 80 others reported missing after suspected rebels of the Allied Democratic Forces ambushed a convoy and set fire to vehicles. CGTN's Chris Ochamringa has more on this report.
The ambush happened near the village of Ofaye in the DRC's northeastern province of Ituri. Local officials say rebels attacked a convoy of 100 vehicles and set fire to 16 of them. Survivors of the attack described a hail of gunfire as the convoy passed near their village. At least 80 people were taken hostage after the ambush. The army spokesperson of Ituri province, Lieutenant Jules Ngongo, says they tracked down the rebels and freed 60 hostages. He blamed the attack on the Allied Democratic Forces that has its origins in neighboring Uganda. Attacks by the ADF and other rebel groups have continued in eastern DRC despite the government's declaration of a state of siege in Ituri and North Kivu province in May this year. The military and the police have taken over the functions of all elected officials in a bid to stop the killing of civilians. But the number of civilians killed in attacks by armed groups has increased according to local NGOs. The east of the DRC has been plagued by violence for over 2 decades. The UN says the illegal exploitation of minerals there has fueled conflict and helped to sustain the armed violence. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
And we're just getting started here on Africa Live. More to come after the break. Here's what's ahead. Hurricane Ida unleashes flooding in New York and New Jersey. And Zimbabwe further eases COVID-19 restrictions as cases decline.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climate and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The island nation of Mauritius is home to some of the most pristine maritime ecosystems in the world. In July 2020, disaster struck when the Japanese carrier ship Wakashio ran aground on the reef a mile from the coast. Over the following 2 weeks, NGOs mobilized foreign aid, but then the ship broke in two, spilling an estimated 1,000 tons of fuel oil into the pristine lagoon.
Ça va prendre des années à revenir, donc parce que les dégâts là, pour nous, quand on regarde, quand on va en mer, c'est irréversible.
Join us as we navigate the far-reaching ramifications, environmental, personal, and political.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. Remnants of Hurricane Ida have brought flash flooding to the New York City area. At least 9 people were killed by the record-breaking rainfall, which swamped subways and neighborhoods. Transportation across New York City remains largely shut down. Crews used boats to rescue people from flooded cars and homes. A tornado leveled houses and in southern New Jersey as well. Ida slammed into Louisiana as a Category 4 hurricane on Sunday before weakening as it moved northward.
We're here today because of a devastating storm that shocked the people of this city. And even the morning after, we're still uncovering the true depth of the loss. Because of climate change, unfortunately, this is something we're going to have to deal with great regularity, and we want to assure all New Yorkers that we're prepared for this and we'll do everything we can in our power to protect human life and property.
What we've got to recognize is the suddenness, the brutality of storms now. It is different. A record set 2 weeks ago, another record set now, rainfall like we haven't seen ever before. This is the biggest wake-up call we could possibly get.
Well, there has been a 5-fold increase in weather-related disasters over the past 50 years, with climate change as a major driver, according to a report by the World Meteorological Organization. The UN body says more than 11,000 disasters were recorded between 1970 and 2019. CGTN's Robert Nagila has more.
The report by the World Meteorological Organization, the Atlas of Mortality and Economic Losses from Weather, Climate and Water Extremes, shows a significant increase in the number of weather-related extreme events due to climate change. The Atlas report says between 1970 and 2019, there were more than 11,000 disasters, resulting in more than 2 million deaths. Droughts led to the largest human losses during the period, accounting for 650,000 deaths. The deadliest drought on record is the 1983 drought in Ethiopia, which claimed about 300,000 lives. Economic losses over the past 50 years cost over $3.6 trillion. The most costly disaster recorded was Hurricane Katrina in 2005, with losses of up to $163 billion. In Africa, Tropical Cyclone Idai that hit Mozambique in 2019 and the 1990 drought in South Africa are jointly the continent's 2 most costly events over the past 50 years, each with an economic cost of over $1.9 billion. Africa accounted for 15% of the weather, climate and water-related disasters. In the past 50 years, 1,695 disasters were recorded on the continent, claiming over 700,000 lives and total economic losses of $38.5 billion. WMO says there are severe gaps in weather observations on the continent, which affects the accuracy of early warning systems. The UN organization is urging wealthy countries to assist developing countries by investing in early warning systems and risk modeling. Robert Nagila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
Zimbabwe's government has further eased COVID-19 restrictions and will allow sports to resume and gyms to reopen. Art galleries and cinemas will also be allowed to open at 50% capacity for vaccinated visitors. Farai Wakatuya reports.
There's been a 30% decline in COVID-19 infections and deaths over the last 7 days, and that has led government to easing some of these restrictions and allowing sports to resume, albeit under very strict prevention protocols, including regular testing, temperature checks, and social distancing. The announcement has brought relief to sports associations, administrators and players, some of whom have been inactive since the pandemic broke out over a year ago.
We are very excited, and for us it has come timely because we've got national assignments for all our national teams, which are coming through within the next 2 to 6 months. So what it means is that now we have to develop a strategy that will allow us to pick the best teams. The technical team is right now working on a return to rugby program. The program will be two-phased. Since we are dealing with two disciplines within the rugby union, that's the sevens, the shorter version of the game, and the 15s, we are going to start off with the 15s.
Ordinary citizens have also welcomed the lifting of restrictions.
So I think it's a good thing because people love sports. We all love sports, so I think bringing the sports back is a good idea.
It's a good thing because people's jobs are opened. People can now work and then they're living because due to the lockdown, people are struggling. I can know some families couldn't eat or anything, so I think the government has done a great thing. But just people have to observe the COVID-19 protocols and stay safe.
Government is also rolling out standard operating procedures that will allow the reopening of universities and colleges. Already this week, school children returned to classes in a phased approach after more than 3 months of forced closure. Farai Wakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa toured the expansion project of the Robert Gabriel Mugabe International Airport in Harare this week. Here he expressed gratitude for China's unwavering support to Zimbabwe's economic development trajectory. The expansion includes the addition of a new international building, 4 new bridges, and an airfield, ground lighting, and communication system. The project is expected to increase the airport's holding capacity to 6 million people per year from a previous 2.5 million. The $153 million initiative, which received funding from the China Export-Import Bank, is ongoing despite some delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic.
We express our profound gratitude to the People's Republic of China and our comprehensive and strategic partnership framework. These are some of the acts the People's Republic of Government have done for our great country. This unwavering support remains a show of confidence which the government of the People's Republic of China have in our economic development trajectory.
Experts in Zambia have been speaking up on the issue of the origin of the COVID-19 pandemic. They are calling for a collective fight against the pandemic rather than trading allegations about its origin.
It is pointless and not good and not wise for any country to start stigmatizing or demonizing any other country for this pandemic. This pandemic is with us and we are losing people. So what is needed is for us to work together as one and fight this deadly pandemic. If we continue, if we start pointing fingers at this country or the other country, we'll be divided, and as a result, the pandemic is going to harm us very bad.
If there are any countries in the world that are accusing China at this particular moment for the outbreak, I think they are missing the point, because what has happened is that this virus has become global, and if we get consumed by accusations and counter-accusations, we will miss the big picture, which is to save the many lives out there where the virus is spreading.
Let's now head to Kenya, where members of the deaf community are calling for the introduction of transparent face masks. They say that this will ease communication since most of them rely on lip reading. Since the introduction of mandatory wearing of face masks across the Eastern African nation, many of them are finding it challenging to communicate.
On the streets of Nairobi, Masi Ayuma plies her trade as a street vendor. Since Kenya made it mandatory for people to wear masks in public, she has been forced to adopt new strategies of communicating with her clients, as she cannot read their lips like before.
We must speak with our masks on in order to effectively communicate, especially with people who do not understand the sign language. With the mask on, it's hard to tell what they're saying.
The new way of survival has come at a cost for those with hearing impairments like Ayuma.
One of my friends was arrested for not wearing a mask. At the time of their arrest, they were on a video call. The police officers thought that he was pretending. We had to step in and stop the arrest by providing his disability identification card.
A cafe in the suburbs of Nairobi employs people with hearing impairments. They too have been forced to employ new techniques of communicating with their customers.
In terms of ordering food using communication, mostly we use books, and from the books we just come to the machine and we dial in. Sometimes, maybe he may explain to us in terms of how the food he needs, so we have to go in through the book communication.
I would say one thing I have noticed about the staff, basically, being hearing impaired, is they're definitely more attentive. Funny enough, we also make more eye contact than typically I would make with other people. And eye contact is a powerful thing. There's a connection that happens through eye contact,
The Kenya National Association of the Deaf says transparent masks should be encouraged to accommodate the deaf community as a form of inclusivity.
There are deaf persons who can write, I want this and this, but you see, there are deaf persons who cannot write. They have to purely depend on sign language. That's a challenge. Similarly, as KNAD, we suggested that they need to make clear masks, transparent masks, which are fog-free.
A national survey for persons with disability done in 2008 indicates that Kenya has around 600,000 people who are deaf. With the regulations to curb the spread of COVID-19, many of them risk being isolated both socially and economically. Shonela Lupuana, CGTN.
Time now for our business segment. Over to you, Uche.
Thanks, Richard. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. We'll bring you the highlights from the first day of China's International Fair for Trade Services in Beijing. And OPEC and its allies agree to gradually increase production as economies recover from the pandemic.
The East China Sea, home of dream seekers, where China's hub for reform and opening up connects with the maritime Silk Road. Whether it's exploring the busiest seaport and trade zone, or witnessing how locals strive for a better life. Join CGTN's adventure, Tides of Change Part 2. A journey enchanted by a dynamic ocean and beyond.
Now, a major trade show has opened in Beijing. Chinese President Xi Jinping spoke via video at the opening ceremony for the China International Fair for Trade in Services. He announced a new stock exchange will be established in Beijing to boost innovation among smaller companies and, of course, deepen reforms. Here's Cui Huayo with a story.
With the theme towards digital future and service-driven development, this year's event has attracted over 10,000 companies from 153 countries and regions. They will be participating in both online and offline exhibitions. The number of Global 500 and industry-leading companies exceeded last year's inaugural event.
Trading services is a key component of international trade and an important area of economic and trade cooperation between countries. It has a big role to play in fostering a new development paradigm. We will work with all other parties to uphold openness, cooperation, mutual benefit, and win-win, share opportunities in the growth of services trade, and promote world economic recovery and growth.
Various activities will be held during the 6-day event, including over 100 forums for entrepreneurs, experts, and officials to discuss hot topics in the service trade. Organizers say that digital economy and carbon neutrality will be the main focus this year. On top of that, finance, tourism, education, and sports sectors will also be represented. President Xi said the event shows China's determination to promote high-level opening up and support global economic recovery.
We will open up at a higher level by implementing across the country a negative list for cross-border services trade, and by exploring the development of national demonstration zones for the innovative development of trading services. We will create more possibilities for cooperation by scaling up support for the growth of the services sector in Belt and Road partner countries, and by sharing China's technological achievements with the rest of the world.
Currently, the share of service trade accounts for nearly 56% of China's GDP. Imports and exports of services totaled over $360 billion in the first half of the year, up almost 7% year-on-year. This is the second time China is hosting this event under the pandemic. Domestically, the service sector is now a strong pillar of the economy, but on a global level, trading services continues to lag behind. Organizers hope this event will bring more opportunities to companies, and more importantly, it will boost domestic and global economies. Cu Huiao, CGTN, reporting from the opening ceremony in Beijing.
Well, let's now delve further into that event with Jude Moore. He's a senior policy fellow at the Center for Global Development, and he joins us now via Zoom in Washington, D.C. Great to have you with us, Mr. Moore. Now, certainly this event is meant to be key for African businesses, given the opportunities that it will provide in terms of market access to China. Give us a sense of how significant this year will be to China-Africa relations going forward.
Thank you again. Thanks for having me. I think there is really important for two reasons. One is that the service sector in Africa now comprises of over 50% of GDP, and 80% of the companies on the continent are classified as small to medium-sized enterprises. So you can see that this expansion in SMEs and the stock market for SMEs is going to be really, really important to the African side. But because service is such a huge portion of the African economy, this is an opportunity for African firms. Because there's been one weakness, even though service as a segment of the African economy has grown, that segment as a part of African exports has actually not grown. So this meeting, it provides an opportunity for connections and an opportunity for African firms to begin to create both regional and global value addition to the service sector.
Now, of course, this year's event focuses on innovation in the digital space, in the green space as well. Give us a sense of how you think Africa can leverage itself so that through this event, it can boost innovation at home, especially, as you mentioned, amongst its smaller companies, and certainly deepen reforms as well.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we've seen is that, as you probably know, that Chinese investment in Africa has largely concentrated in mining and construction, with a little bit in manufacturing, and now it's beginning to expand into financing. The service sector has actually not seen as much in terms of that. So this is an opportunity for that to grow. But more importantly, I think for smaller African firms, as they go out at such an event, the importance is that the continent itself is in an integration mode with the AfCFTA. Well, if you're going to integrate regionally, you need to understand what the opportunities are that exist in this sector. And so for a significant number of African firms, this is really, really important. But for the service sector to function properly, the regulatory environment has to be set. And so for these firms and the governments that are participating, the kinds of reforms that need to happen for the service sector to grow as it should on the continent, one hopes this is some of the things we can learn here. So from our Chinese counterparts, we learn what it takes to structure the sector so that it performs well, what kinds of policies government have to have in place so that small and medium enterprises are able to thrive in this. So again, these kinds of meetings are really, really important because of the connection they make between the regional and the global value chains, especially for the service sector.
Quite right. Well, we do have to leave it there. Many thanks for your insights, Mr. Moore. That, of course, was Jude Moore, a Senior Policy Fellow at the Center for Global Development. And moving on now, exporters and importers in China are continuing to feel the effects of a disrupted global shipping industry. Despite China's foreign trade hitting a year-on-year record high of $3.2 trillion in the first 7 months of the year, companies that have long relied on the country's ports are now feeling its impact. And as our reporter Omar Khan explains, they're having to rely on their stockpiles and other strategies.
If you were to summarize the current shipping situation from a company's perspective, how do you describe the situation in one sentence?
The more investment of storage you have in China, the better you can react to uncertainty like we have now.
That's certainly one way of putting it. With no contingency plan, business would come to a standstill. David Wine, a Spanish company, has been importing wine into China for the past 10 years, a decade milestone the company recently celebrated. But then came COVID-19, disrupting shipping as ports worldwide closed or downsized operations due to lockdowns. China has since recovered, but many parts of the world have not. That's led to a dilemma faced by importers like David Wine.
During February to March to April in 2020, nobody can work. So in this case, a lot of containers coming from other countries to China, nobody going to do the loading, nobody going to do the declarance. So at that time was thousands of ships in the port of China. And in this moment, all the containers is outside of China again. And nobody do the loading, nobody do the declarance in all the other countries. So in this case, all the containers stock in other countries.
In late May, Shenzhen's Yantian port suspended operations after the province of Guangdong saw a spike in COVID-19 infections. Then in August, a major terminal at the Ningbo Zhoushan port, the world's busiest in terms of cargo tonnage, also temporarily halted services after a single case of coronavirus was detected. Port operators are calling for a collective effort, stating that solutions to alleviating pressures on the global supply chain are a global one.
If we want to bring shipping back to normal, I think our domestic efforts alone won't be enough. Joint efforts by global shippers in other countries are needed. In China, domestic ports are busy, but waiting times aren't long. Actually, the current congestion is overseas, like in Los Angeles. Here, we can process a ship between 1 to 2 days, but overseas, like in Europe, it could take as long as a week.
Solving the coronavirus pandemic is going to need time, especially with the Delta variant's continued spread. But time is not on business's side as supply and demand shift and container prices continue to rise, affecting companies' spending and ultimately their bottom line.
And now become 6,000, nearly 10,000 US dollar to export to rent one container to export. And for importation, the freight already increased almost 4 times the freight to China but the time didn't be faster. The time become another 4 times more.
We reached out to a major shipping business for comment on the price hikes businesses are now facing. The company declined to be interviewed. With China's zero-tolerance COVID policy and the rest of the world in varying stages of battling the virus, it's going to be a waiting game for companies as they continue to adapt to a pandemic still wreaking havoc on global commerce and trade. Omar Khan, CGTN, Guangzhou.
And turning our attention to commodities now, oil prices fell on Thursday. That's after OPEC and its allies agreed to keep the policy of gradually increasing supply to the market. Now, the decision comes as world economies and demand for fuel continues to recover from the worst of the coronavirus pandemic. Starting on the 1st of October, the group will add about 400,000 barrels per day to the market. Some oil experts are concerned, however, that this decision may lead to an oversupply of oil in 2022. Meanwhile, in Egypt, the country is now banking on a digital transformation to drive economic growth after the coronavirus-induced slowdown. Authorities in the North African nation have launched a Digital Egypt plan that seeks to diversify its economy by adopting technology to spur innovation. Here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim reporting.
Egypt's digital transformation drive began officially in 2017, but has picked up steam after the onset of the coronavirus pandemic in 2020. The government is gradually digitizing most services in the North African country, be they public or private.
There's a clear strategy to build a digital community and an online state website that provides 70 services so far. The strategy also includes a legal aspect with regulations already rectified by Parliament to organize this sector, such as the Electronic Activities Law. It also includes building a developed infrastructure to elevate from 4G to 5G internet service. An important element is the National Council for the Cybersecurity that was established 4 years ago to ensure the safety of all online transactions and activities.
Paying all types of bills, issuing car licenses, building permits, certificates and more are now being handled online. This drive has opened the door for tech companies and startups in the e-sector to flourish in the market.
The e-economy accounts for about 5% of Egypt's GDP, which is not a small amount. Egypt leads Africa and in the Middle East in outsourcing services and is 10th in the world. Egypt's e-exports has increased from $5 billion to $6 billion, which is a considerable increase, while startups in the e-sector are also on the rise, with many of them going global. The financial sector has been the leader in this transformation in Egypt and many other countries because the fast transfer of money is a crucial aspect in modern societies and businesses worldwide. To guarantee the fast and safe transfer of capital, investment and payments, it requires a strong infrastructure and developed banking systems to keep up with this fast-growing market.
The ease of online banking has also attracted more Egyptians to open bank accounts. This has accelerated the target set by the government, which is achieving financial inclusion for most of the Egyptian population. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And heading to Tunisia now, the country has announced it will receive $776 million as its allocation of special drawing rights from the International Monetary Fund. Now, the allocation by the Washington-based lender will help it ease an acute economic crisis, of course, caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's CGTN's Adnan Chaushi reporting.
Just a week after the IMF announced the largest allocation of special drawing rights in history of $650 billion, authorities in Tunisia said they will receive $775.8 million as the SDR allocation comes into effect. Economists explain that the SDR allocation will provide additional liquidity to the global economic system.
Tunisia's share is $775.8 million, according to the country's contribution to the special drawing rights. This is not a loan from the IMF. The sum will provide a foreign exchange reserve for Tunisia and increase the state's reserves in foreign currency globally. It contributes to improving the financial situation in the world in both a direct and indirect way.
The president of the Circle of Tunisian Financiers says the North African state can use the amount provided by the Bretton Woods Institute to support its economy and step up the fight against the prevailing economic, social and health crisis.
If Tunisia uses its SDR right, supplements its foreign currency reserve, and uses it to finance state funds, it will not have to pay back the money to the IMF. It's therefore an available liquidity for Tunisia to finance the budget deficit and other expenses. However, the amount must be used in the right manner, because this opportunity comes rarely.
According to the National Institute of Statistics, economic growth in Tunisia is currently volatile amid the pandemic fallout. The national economy shrank 0.2% in the second quarter of 2021. Analysts say the IMF allocation will support the country's economy that has been battered by the COVID-19 pandemic.
The IMF allocation is a significant push for Tunisia, which is still battling the pandemic and its disastrous economic and social consequences. The IMF president noted that SDRs are a precious resource which need to be deployed for the maximum benefit of member countries and the global economy.
The IMF managing director declared that SDRs are being distributed to countries in proportion to their quota shares in the International Monetary Fund. This means about $275 billion is going to emerging and developing countries. Economists say the special drawing rights allocation will provide additional liquidity to the global economic system, supplementing the foreign exchange reserves of countries including Tunisia and reducing their reliance on more expensive domestic or external debt. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, we'll bring you more analysis of China's International Fair for Trade Services happening now in Beijing. All of that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to Richard.
Thank you so much, Uche. Don't go away. You're watching Africa Live. We'll see you on the other side of the break with a lot more. Here's what's ahead. Tourism at the Serengeti National Park in Tanzania blossoms amidst the coronavirus pandemic.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Welcome back to Africa Live. Tanzania's Serengeti National Park has started to see the return of tourists from all over the world as countries push on with their vaccine rollouts. Thousands have come to the park to witness one of the world's most iconic sights, the Great Wildebeest Migration, as well as the Big Five of the African savanna. Officially established in the early 1950s, the Serengeti is one of Africa's oldest national parks and one of the most famous in the world. CGTN's Daniel Kijo visits the great park and brings us this wonderful story.
The Serengeti National Park is not only a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it is also one of the most famous wildlife sanctuaries in the world. Of all of Tanzania's 22+ national parks, the Serengeti is the crown jewel, generating almost half of the total revenue for the Tanzania National Parks Authority. Juliet Sumari has been a guide at the park for over 4 years. After a year of disruptions due to COVID-19 travel restrictions, she says she's glad crowds have picked up this summer, as vaccinated tourists from all over the world come to witness one of the most spectacular sights in the natural world.
We thank God the situation now is not like it was last year. Now we have guests, as you can see. Every couple of days you receive tourists. Little by little, over time, we can get a lot. So I'm thankful to God.
The park is the ultimate destination to spot lions, rhinos, elephants, leopards and buffaloes, commonly known as Africa's Big Five. The Serengeti Park was named Africa's leading park in 2019 and 2020 by the World Travel Awards. Tourists who came to the park say they are not disappointed.
Every day we have had something that we thought could not possibly be topped, and the next day is even more spectacular. So we've been able to see all the animals in the Big Five, so much more variety and wildlife than I thought we would encounter. In practice, it's been absolutely incredible.
You hear it before you see it. One of the Serengeti's most sought-out sights, the thundering hooves on the Great Plains, as a great migration gets underway. Over 1.5 million wildebeests in perpetual motion. Before the COVID-19 pandemic, each year over 450,000 tourists from all over the world come to the Serengeti to witness this. Thousands of wildebeest crossing River Mara into the Masai Mara Reserve. The Serengeti continues to lure the world's top celebrities, musicians, actors, and sports personalities. It has been the site of many Hollywood productions and the inspiration behind Disney's The Lion King. But visitors say seeing it in the flesh is much more fulfilling.
To see this reality.
I have seen this from a lot of virtual reality, some documentary, television and publicity. But to be here to see this with my own eyes is amazing.
The Serengeti showcases the beauty of the world's circle of life. And after a difficult year, those here hope growing visitor numbers will breathe fresh life into the country's tourism sector. Daniel Kijo, CGTN, Serengeti, Tanzania.
We're not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up.